Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
So I got slapped with a $500 fine for my garden gnome. Yeah, you read that right. A ceramic gnome with a fishing rod, sitting harmlessly by my front porch. The kicker, the Homeowners Association that issued the fine didn't actually exist. It was a phantom HOA, a slick little scam built on fake letterheads, intimidation, and the assumption that nobody would ever dig too deep. What started as a ridiculous penalty over a lawn ornament turned into something much bigger. That little ceramic guy ended up pulling me into a maze of property records, county filings, and old legal documents. The deeper I went, the more I uncovered. Years of bogus fines, dues sent to a P.O. box, and neighbors paying out of fear because they thought it was all legitimate. This isn't just about a $500 fine anymore. It's about how a cheap fishing rod gnome became the key to exposing a neighborhood-wide con, and how I armed my neighbors with the proof they needed to finally stop paying. This is the story of how I dismantled a fake HOA. It all started on a Tuesday, just a completely normal, boring Tuesday. The sun was out, and my biggest problem was making sure my new petunias were getting enough water. Our neighborhood is quiet, you know. The kind of place where people wave when they get their mail. It's not fancy. No gates, no perfectly identical lawns. It's just a bunch of unique homes, each with its own personality. My home's personality at that moment was being expressed by a small, brightly painted garden gnome named Gary. Gary was a gift from my niece. He's got a red hat, a white beard, a tiny fishing pole. He's completely harmless, just a little bit of fun next to our bird bath. That afternoon I go to get the mail, and there it is. Tucked between a credit card offer and a grocery store flyer is this stiff, cream-colored envelope. It had a generic logo of a house under a tree, and the words Westwood Neighborhood Homeowners Association in a very serious-looking font. I figured it was just their quarterly newsletter, the one that usually reminds everyone to mow their lawns. I opened it without really thinking. It wasn't a newsletter. It was a formal notice of violation. I'm scanning this page of dense, bureaucratic nonsense, and I see the words, violation, unapproved yard adornments. It said that according to Westwood HOA Community Guidelines Article 4, Section 2B, all decorations had to be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I'd never even heard of an Architectural Review Committee. Below that was a grainy, zoomed-in photo of Gary, looking like a tiny criminal, and then I saw the number that made my stomach drop. A fine of $500 has been assessed to your property. Payment is due within 30 days to avoid further penalties, including a lien on your property. $500. For a garden gnome. It was so insane for a second I thought it had to be a joke. A prank from a neighbor maybe, but the letter was cold, threatening, and dripping with this self-important authority. I read it again, and then a third time. My disbelief just curdled into pure anger. A lien on my property over a gnome my 7-year-old niece gave me? Who were these people? I've been paying their couple $100 in annual dues. They said it was for maintaining the little park at the neighborhood entrance. But I had never signed anything. I never agreed to this level of control. Holding that piece of paper, I just felt cornered, bullied. They took a picture of my property, judged my taste, and were now trying to extort money from me. Well, they picked the wrong guy, and they definitely picked the wrong gnome. Gary and I were going to war. My first instinct was just to fire off an angry email and let them have it. But I knew that wouldn't work. People who write letters like that hide behind rules. So I decided to play their game and use their own rules against them. The letter cited Article 4, Section 2B. Okay, fine. I wanted to see it. The letter was signed, Sincerely Karen Miller, HOA President. I didn't know Karen, but I knew of her. She lived a few streets over in a house with a lawn that looked like it was maintained with tweezers and had zero personality. I found the HOA's email on an old newsletter and wrote a very polite, very careful message. I acknowledged the notice and, basically playing dumb, requested a full copy of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC&Rs, and the bylaws that covered the fine and appeals process. My early research told me that any legit HOA has to provide these documents to a homeowner. I was setting my first, simple trap. Karen's response 2 days later was the first huge red flag. No attachment, no link, just a short condescending reply. The community guidelines are provided to all new residents, she wrote. We all follow the same rules to maintain property values. I suggest you simply remove the item and pay the fine. Her dodging was so telling. She wasn't sending the legally binding documents, she was pointing me to a handbook. The next day, a few stapled pages showed up in my mailbox. A terrible photocopy of the Westwood neighborhood handbook. It was a disaster. The pages were crooked, there were coffee stains, and the font changed halfway through. It was full of petty rules. No basketball hoops out overnight, holiday decorations down within 14 days, hedges no taller than 4 feet, but it read like a list of suggestions, not a legal contract. There was no county recording stamp, no legal language about my property. It was just a list. This was not a legal document. This was an amateur production. My suspicion went into overdrive. It was time to talk to some neighbors. I started with Dave next door, a retiree who's always out in his garden. I showed him the letter, and he just sighed. "Oh yeah, Karen's crew," he said. "Got one last year for my recycling bin being visible from the street. Cost me $100. He just paid it. It was easier than fighting," he said. He'd been paying dues and fines for nearly a decade. Then I talked to the Jacksons, a younger couple who had moved in a couple of years ago. They got a warning about their kid's plastic playset in the backyard, and they were terrified of getting a $500 fine. The story was the same all over the neighborhood. People were living with this low-grade fear, worried that one wrong move would get them a threatening letter and a bill. They all just assumed the HOA was legit. No one had ever thought to question its authority. Until now, that flimsy, coffee-stained handbook wasn't a rule book, it was a clue, and it told me I needed to dig a lot deeper. Talking to Karen and my neighbors confirmed what my gut was screaming. This whole setup was a sham. The unprofessional handbook, the secrecy about official documents, the fear, it just didn't add up. An organization with the power to put liens on people's homes needs to be built on a rock-solid legal foundation. It was time to go find the paperwork, or, as I suspected, prove it never existed. My first stop was my own filing cabinet. When you buy a house, you get a mountain of documents. I pulled out the huge folder from my closing, the one with the title policy and the deed. My heart was pounding as I sifted through it. I'm not a lawyer, but I knew what to look for. Any mention of a mandatory homeowners association? I was hunting for a clause referencing covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs. CC&Rs are the master document for any real HOA. They're a legal instrument recorded with the county that's attached to the title of every single property in the HOA. It's the contract that legally binds you to their rules and dues. If you are in a mandatory HOA, it will be screamingly obvious in your closing documents. It's not an optional club. I spread the papers across my dining room table, the deed, the title report. I read them page by page, scanning for HOA, association, covenants. I scoured the exceptions on my title insurance, the section that lists anything and everything that affects the property's title. Nothing. There was absolutely zero mention of the Westwood Neighborhood Homeowners Association. No CC&Rs attached to my property. Not one legal document in the entire pile obligated me to any HOA whatsoever. It was a total aha moment. A jolt of pure adrenaline. For all their official-looking letters and scary threats, if my property wasn't legally tied to their rules, they were just a club. A club with an intimidating letterhead maybe, but still just a club. And you can't be forced to join a club. And you definitely can't be fined by a club you never agreed to be in. But I needed to be 100% sure. This had to be more than just a theory. I needed proof that this wasn't just some mistake on my paperwork. I needed to confirm the entire association was a ghost. That meant a trip downtown to the county recorder's office. The office was exactly what you'd picture. Old paper smell and humming fluorescent lights. I told the clerk I wanted to search the public records for any HOA declarations or CC&Rs filed for the Westwood neighborhood. She pointed me to a computer, and for the next 3 hours, I became a digital archaeologist. I searched by subdivision name, by street, by neighbors' names, by Karen Miller. I looked up the original plat map for the neighborhood from the 70s. I was searching for that one single document that would have created this mandatory HOA, and I found exactly what I expected. Nothing. Zip, nada. No master declaration of covenants. No articles of incorporation for a Westwood Neighborhood Homeowners Association had ever been filed. No such legal entity existed. It was all a lie. A total fabrication. This wasn't an HOA that let its registration lapse. This was a group of people who had morphed over time from a voluntary neighborhood club into a predatory, illegitimate organization. They were essentially running a protection racket, tricking people into paying them money under the false pretense of legal authority. They were counting on the fact that nobody would ever do what I had just done. Their entire empire was built on a bluff, and I was about to call it. I walked out of that county building feeling 10 feet tall. I had the truth, a folder full of proof. But I knew confronting a bully, especially one who had a whole neighborhood under their thumb, requires more than just facts. I needed to be bulletproof. I needed a lawyer. I spent the evening searching for real estate attorneys in my state who specialized in HOA law. The next day I made some calls. I was direct. I think I've uncovered a fraudulent HOA and I need a consultation to confirm my findings. One lawyer, Mr. Davies, immediately got it. "Oh, you'd be surprised how often this happens," he said on the phone. "Let's talk." I paid for an hour of his time and laid everything out on his conference table. The Gnome fine, Karen's snotty email, the flimsy handbook and my crown jewels, the clean title report, and the printouts from the county recorder. He listened, examined the documents, and did a quick search on his own computer, verifying my research. After about 20 minutes, he leaned back, took off his glasses, and gave me this huge grin. "Well, congratulations," he said. "You've done my job for me. This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've ever seen." The relief was incredible. He then gave me a crash course in HOA law. An HOA's authority isn't magic, he explained. It comes from a contract, the CC&Rs. That contract must be recorded with the county and attached to your property's title. Without that recorded document, there is no mandatory HOA, period. Now, of course, laws can vary a bit from state to state, but for a mandatory HOA, this is the bedrock principle. He tapped the violation letter. "This," he said, "is legally meaningless. It has the same authority as a letter from your cousin saying he doesn't like your curtains. They can ask for money, but they have zero legal power to force you to pay." I had to ask about the scariest part. "What about the lien? Can they really put a lien on my house?" He shook his head. "Absolutely not. To file a lien, you need a legal basis like a contract or a court judgment. They have neither. If they tried to file a fraudulent lien, they could be sued for slander of title. It's an empty threat, designed to scare you." He confirmed they were running on pure bluff, preying on the fact that it's easier to just pay a $100 fine than to spend days digging through property law. I left his office with a strategy. He helped me draft a formal response letter to Karen, citing the lack of recorded CC&Rs, stating I would not be paying the fine, would not be removing the Gnome, and did not recognize their authority. But more importantly, he gave me the confidence for the next step. This wasn't just about my Gnome anymore. This was about liberating my neighborhood. The next community meeting was in 2 weeks. It was time for a showdown. Those 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. I couldn't just stand up and rant. Karen's crew would dismiss me as a crazy person. I needed an airtight case, and I needed to deliver it directly to the victims, my neighbors. My weapon of choice, an information packet. I designed a simple 2-page handout. Page 1 was titled, "Is the Westwood Neighborhood HOA Legitimate? The Facts You Need to Know." It started with a bold statement. The entity calling itself the Westwood Neighborhood Homeowners Association has no legal authority to levy fines, enforce rules, or place liens on our properties. Below that, I laid out the proof in bullet points. No recorded CC&Rs, why that means no mandatory HOA, and that any threat of a lien was unenforceable. At the bottom I put a simple guide titled Verify for Yourself, with the county recorder's website and instructions on how to search their own address. I wanted to empower them to see it for themselves. Page 2 was a copy of the polite but firm letter my lawyer helped me draft to Karen. It was a template for how to push back. I printed 100 copies. I felt like a revolutionary arming the people with forbidden knowledge. The night of the meeting, the air in the library's multipurpose room was stale. About 40 neighbors were there. Up front at a long table sat Karen and her 2 cronies, looking smug. They went through their usual vague treasurer's report, lump sums for landscaping and administrative costs. Then Karen started her usual scolding about rose bushes and trash cans. I sat patiently, my bag of packets at my feet, heart pounding. Finally she said, "All right, the floor is now open for any resident concerns." This was it. I stood up, my voice surprisingly steady. "Hi, my name is your name. I do have some new business to discuss." All eyes turned to me. Karen squinted, annoyed. She probably thought I was about to whine about the Gnome fine. "A couple of weeks ago," I began, "I received a $500 fine from this association. This led me to do some research into the legal basis of the association itself. And what I found is something every single one of you needs to know." A murmur went through the room. I walked to the front, packets in hand. Karen tried to interrupt. "Sir, if this is about a personal fine," I cut her off. "This isn't about a personal fine, Karen. This is about the legitimacy of this entire organization. I turned to my neighbors. I'm handing out some information derived directly from public county records. I walked the aisles, handing a packet to everyone. The room filled with the rustle of paper. I could see people's eyes scanning page 1. Expressions changed from curious to confused, then to shocked. People looked up from the paper at Karen and back at the paper. I got back to the front. As you can see, I said, my voice rising with confidence, the Westwood Neighborhood Homeowners Association does not appear to exist as a legal entity with authority over our properties. I've personally checked the county records. There are no CC&Rs that bind us to this organization. That means we are not legally obligated to pay its dues, follow its rules, and it has absolutely no power to fine us or lien our homes. The room went dead silent, and then it exploded. Is this true? Someone yelled. My neighbor Dave stood up. I paid $100 for my trash can. You're telling me I didn't have to? The Jacksons looked at me. Then at Karen with dawning realization. Karen's face was a mask of fury. This is outrageous slander. We are a registered nonprofit. The voluntary neighborhood society is one thing, Karen, I said calmly, quoting my lawyer, but you're presenting yourself as a mandatory HOA with legal powers you don't have. You're sending threatening letters and demanding money under false pretenses. If you have the recorded CC&Rs that give you authority, please show them to us. Right now, she just sputtered. They're on file. This is just a tactic to avoid your fine, but the bluster was empty, and everyone saw it. The spell was broken. She had nothing to show. Her only weapon was our ignorance, and I had just disarmed her in front of everyone. The meeting fell into chaos, with neighbors grilling a flustered Karen who could only offer weak denials and hollow threats. The power had shifted and her authority had just evaporated. That meeting was the explosion. The days that followed were the shockwave. My little 2-page handout went viral in the neighborhood. My phone didn't stop ringing. Neighbors I'd only ever waved to were stopping me on the street holding the packet and asking, "Is this for real?" I spent the weekend showing people on their phones how to look up their own properties on the county website. You could almost see the light bulbs going on over their heads. The fake HOA tried to fight back. A week later, a new wave of angry letters went out, calling my information malicious misinformation and threatening legal action. Too late. The bluff had been called. Armed with knowledge, people started pushing back. My neighbors started sending replies based on the template. Pursuant to my research, there are no recorded covenants granting your organization authority. Therefore, I will not be remitting payment. My neighbor Dave even sent a letter demanding a refund for his trash can fine. He never got it, but he also never heard from them again. The financial collapse was fast. With no dues coming in, the money dried up. The landscaping service stopped showing up at the neighborhood entrance. The flowers wilted. The illusion was literally dying. The solidarity was the best part. A few of us formed an email list to share information. We learned the HOA was just a private bank account controlled by Karen and her 2 friends. No oversight, no public statements. For all we knew, our dues were funding their vacations. We collectively filed a complaint with the state's attorney general for deceptive practices. The pathetic end came about a month later. A single sheet of paper was taped to the community mailbox kiosk. It was from Karen. In a short, bitter paragraph, she announced that due to a lack of community support, the Westwood Neighborhood Homeowners Association was ceasing all operations, effective immediately. No apology, no admission of guilt, just a final spiteful sign-off, and just like that, they were gone. The phantom that had been haunting our neighborhood was vanquished, not by a lawsuit but by a simple truth found in a public record. In the weeks after the fake HOA dissolved, something amazing happened. The fear was gone, and something much better took its place. The first thing you noticed was this explosion of personal expression. The Jacksons' kids' playset was now proudly in the middle of their yard. A house down the street put up a bright purple front door. And in my yard, Gary the Gnome was soon joined by a flock of pink plastic flamingos. A gift from Dave, who said he'd always wanted them. Our lawns became this beautiful chaotic mix of personalities. Not a boring carpet of conformity, but it was deeper than that. We started acting like actual neighbors. We organized a voluntary neighborhood watch. We planned a potluck barbecue in the very park the fake HOA pretended to maintain. We all pitched in a few bucks, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We spent a Saturday cleaning it up together, planting new flowers. We were building a community, not a compliance machine. My life went back to normal. The mail was boring again. The peace I felt wasn't just the absence of a fight, it was the deep satisfaction of standing up for yourself and winning. The whole thing taught me that we have more power than we think. We just have to be willing to question things and not let anyone bully us. In the end, it all comes back to Gary the gnome. He still sits by the bird bath, fishing pole in hand. He's a little chipped, his paint is a little faded, but to me he's a monument. He's a small ceramic symbol of a very big idea, that your home is your own and you should never have to pay a fine for a little bit of joy.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share.